Hi, I'm Kim, and this is an oasis of books. Today, I want to share with you number 3 in my Mary Stewart videos. At the beginning of October, I announced I was starting a new reading event called Suspense in October, which I decided to do to highlight and commemorate, celebrate the author Mary Stewart, the Queen of Suspense. And I have really enjoyed rereading Mary Stewart's novels and catching a few that I maybe missed along the way in my teenage years. And it has been a real joy, actually. I was a little hesitant to get started, maybe, thinking, will they live up to my memories? But they have. So in today's video, I want to talk not only about Mary Stewart as a writer, but also as a person, because I don't really think you can separate the two. I know she didn't think you could. So one of the questions that was asked to Mary repeatedly was, how do you think of yourself as a writer? Would you classify yourself mostly as romantic suspense, historical fiction, gothic novels, fantasy, mystery perhaps? This is what Mary Stewart had to say. I'd rather just say that I write novels, fast-moving stories that entertain. To my mind, there are really only two kinds of novels, badly written and well-written. Beyond that, you cannot categorize. Mary Stewart truly saw herself as a storyteller and often said that is the title she wanted to claim and be known for. And I think we can see that she deserved that title because no one tells a story quite like she does. One of the reasons for that is the strong female characters that Mary Stewart introduced to women's fiction. Well, a lot of men liked it back then too, and still do today. And why were those characters different? How were they different than the female protagonists that had been presented in books up to that point? On the whole, they were more independent and more capable than the young women heroines that had come in the books before them. They thought for themselves. They were compassionate, but they acted on that compassion. They were strong and bold and adventurous, and in one form or another, they all had a sense of humor. Now, several times Mary Stewart was asked, do you write from your own personal experience? Now, a lot of authors are asked that question, and many of them say, oh yes, I try to experience everything that my characters do so that it can be authentic. Although Mary Stewart was a stickler for going to the places she wrote about so she could describe them authentically, she did not believe that she needed to experience things like being chased by the bad guys, being held at gunpoint, being kidnapped, being involved in a dangerous high-speed chase in order to write about it. In fact, she said, I think I know how it would feel if I were involved in those things. The place for truth is not in the facts of a novel, it's in the feelings. So we've talked about the fact that 15 of Mary Stewart's books are romantic suspense novels. Well, one of them is a novella that I would technically classify as a short story since it's so short, but we'll give it to her and call it 15. Then, of course, she has her 4 Arthurian legend books, historical fiction, mythology, fantasy that are beloved by so many people, but quite different from her romantic suspense. And then she has a book of poetry and 3 children's books. But of course, this reading event, Suspense in October, is talking about her 15 romantic suspense novels. And by definition, we know these novels are full of suspense, full of danger, full of mystery, full of risk. And, those hints of romance that come here and there and almost always present us with a wonderful case of believable, somehow, insta-love at the end of the book. But what are the deeper themes that run throughout these 15 books? Is there one theme that seems to weave its way through all of them? I think there is, and so do many others, including award-winning mystery author Catherine Hall Page. She says underlying all Mary Stewart's works is the notion of the interconnectedness of humankind and the responsibilities that must follow. She also points out that there is a key element, a key word, in fact, that reoccurs in almost every book that Mary Stewart writes, and that word is pattern. And how is it portrayed? What does it mean? Well, in Madam, Will You Talk, Charity, the main character, says at the beginning, as she's about to recant this nearly unbelievable tale, that her part in this play is to break and reform the patterns of my whole life. And in My Brother Michael, Camilla, the main character, says, in the end, it's our place in the pattern that matters. Personally, I think this theory is correct. I also had noticed that Mary emphasized the word pattern, and even more than that, the connectedness between her and everyone she met. And you see this especially with young children, and we'll come back to that in a little bit. One thing many people notice when they read Mary Stewart's romantic suspense novels is that her characters seemingly fall in love very quickly and seemingly get married very quickly, or, are on the way to the altar in any case. Some even call it what they term Insta love and assume they will find it unbelievable, because usually Insta love is unbelievable, isn't it? I mean, how many people do you know that when they first meet someone, almost immediately fall in love and get married? Not many, huh? But it does happen. My own parents met each other when they were 14, fell in love, stayed together throughout high school, got married right after high school, and stayed married for 46 years until my mom sadly passed. So yes, we all know that it's rare, but it does happen. Well, the reason that Mary Stewart writes it this way and can write it this way so believably is because it happened to her. After receiving a degree in English from Durham University, Mary Stewart worked as a school teacher throughout World War II. In 1945, she met Frederick Stewart at a formal party. And when she met him, she says she knew he was the one. They were married 3 months later, and her husband later said he had felt the same instant love she had. 11 years later, they moved to Scotland, and at that point, Mary stopped teaching and started spending all of her time writing. Her husband was very supportive and very encouraging of her. In fact, it's only because of him that she finally submitted her first book to the publishers. Now, Mary Stewart was a real introvert and a very private person, and thankfully she did step out of that privacy bubble a bit to share her stories with the world, but it was kind of touch and go for a while. When she did submit that first novel to the publishers and they sent her back the proofs, she was just appalled at how she felt. She told the publishers, "Destroy them. I don't want to publish them." She said, "It felt like walking naked down the street. So much of oneself goes into a book." Thankfully, the publishers ignored her. They convinced her to let them use her real name, Mary Stewart, and not the pen name, Mary Rainbow, that she wanted to use. So as I mentioned in one of my first videos about Mary Stewart, her real name, her birth name, was Mary Florence Eleanor Rainbow, then once married Stewart. But yes, she let them convince her to use her own name. And she agreed they could change the title to something they felt more appropriate, and thus we have Madam, Will You Talk, which once released became a nearly instant bestseller, and Mary was crowned almost immediately Queen of Suspense. Now, I've mentioned Mary Stewart's novella, The Wind Off the Small Isles, a few times, and in this little bind-up is also Mary Stewart's short story, The Lost One, which in fact is a prequel to the novella. So that's why they put them together, and it works very well. But in this beautiful book is a foreword written by Jennifer Ogden, Mary Stewart's niece. And I just want to read you a small portion of it because it answers a question I had, and I think many of Mary's faithful readers have had through the years. And that question is, not just did Mary Stewart have children, because it's pretty easy to find out that she did not, but was that somehow connected to the way Mary Stewart would place her female protagonist in contact with a child that was in danger, who was at risk of being hurt, who she needed to step in, take action, put herself at risk in order to help them and save them? I really felt strongly that there was more to that. Well, let's listen to what her niece had to say. As her niece and also her constant companion for the last 12 years of her life, I came to know Mary Stewart, Auntie Mary, extremely well, and also to realize how lucky we have been as a family to have had within it this extraordinary and fascinating woman. I miss her terrific sense of humor, her flashes of brilliance, her kind heart, and her generosity to everyone she met or knew. Most of all, though, I recall her love for us, her nieces and nephews. We took the place of the children she could never have. So, she could never have children. She loved her nieces and nephews dearly, and we see throughout many of her books that her heroines also loved children and made a point of putting themselves last, putting the children first. So that's something special, I feel, that Mary put in her books that was very much part of herself. Let's do something a little fun. I'm going to go through every one of Mary Stewart's 15 romantic suspense novels and read you the first line. Okay, I'm going to cheat a few times and give you the second line, or because some of her sentences are very long, what will seem like a paragraph. But really, most of them, just a short first line. Now, will these always be profound? No, but they always do seem to be intriguing. So up first, from 1955 is, Madam, Will You Talk? First line, the whole affair began so very quietly. Second book, Wildfire at Midnight, 1956. In the first place, I suppose, it was my parents' fault for giving me a silly name like Gianetta. Book 3, Thunder on the Right, 1957. The growl and roar of thunder rolled and re-echoed from the mountains, and the sword of the lightning stabbed down and stabbed again, as if searching through the depths of the cringing woods for whatever sheltered there. Book number 4, 9 Coaches Waiting, 1958. I was thankful that nobody was there to meet me at the airport. We reached Paris just as the light was fading. Book number 5, My Brother Michael, 1959. Nothing ever happens to me. I wrote the words slowly, looked at them for a moment with a little sigh, then put my ballpoint pen down on the cafe table and rummaged in my handbag for a cigarette. Number 6, The Ivy Tree, 1961. I might have been alone in a painted landscape. And a slightly longer excerpt, book number 7, The Moon Spinners, 1962. It was the egret flying out of the lemon grove that started it. I won't pretend I saw it straight away as the conventional herald of adventure, the white stag of the fairy tale, which, bounding from the enchanted thicket, entices the prince away from his followers and loses him in the forest where danger threatens with the dusk. But when the big white bird flew suddenly up among the glossy leaves and the lemon flowers and wheeled into the mountain, I followed it. What else is there to do when such a thing happens on a brilliant April noonday at the foot of the white mountains of Crete? When the road is hot and dusty, but the gorge is green and full of the sound of water, and the white wings flying ahead flicker in and out of deep shadow, and the air is full of the scent of lemon blossoms. Book number 8, This Rough Magic, 1964. And if it's a boy, said Felita cheerfully, we'll call him Prospero. I laughed. Poor little chap, why on earth? Oh, of course. Has someone been telling you that Corfu was Shakespeare's magic island for the Tempest? Another slightly longer excerpt, book number 9, Airs Above the Ground, 1965. Carmel Lacey is the silliest woman I know, which is saying a good deal. The only reason that I was having tea with her in Harrods on that wet Thursday afternoon was that when she rang me up, she had been so insistent that it had been impossible to get out of. And besides, I was so depressed anyway that even tea with Carmel Lacey was preferable to sitting alone at home in a room that still seemed to be echoing with that last quarrel with Lewis. Book number 10, The Gabriel Hounds, 1967. I Met Him in the Street Called Straight. Book number 11, Touch Not the Cat, 1976. My lover came to me on the last night in April with a message and a warning that sent me home to him. Yeah, that's the paranormal one where she has telepathy. Number 12, Thornyhold, 1988. I suppose my mother could have been a witch if she had chosen to. Number 13, The Stormy Petrel, 1991. I must begin with a coincidence, which I would not dare to recount if this were a work of fiction. She goes on to say, coincidences happen daily in real life, which would be condemned in a mere story, so writers tend to avoid them. But they happen, daily they happen. And on this particular day, they, or rather it, happened twice. Book number 14, Rose Cottage, her last full-length romantic suspense novel, published in 1997. It is 1947, a calm, still day of June. On the wide-spreading moorland, the ling is dark and as yet unflowering, but the bell heather is out and the bees are busy. Sunday afternoon peace. And I'm going to include her novella as book number 15, The Wind Off the Small Isles. Now, this was published in 1968 after book number 10 and before her last 4 full-length romantic suspense novels. What was the first line? My employer, Cora Gresham, is a woman of wealth and also a woman of whims. You might think I've covered everything there is to cover about Mary Stewart and her books, but oh no, there's more. And in my next video, I'm going to talk about Mary Stewart's book of poetry, Mary Stewart's short stories, and an essay by Mary Stewart that I found in a highly unusual place. I'm even going to touch on Mary Stewart's 4 Arthurian fantasies, which so many people around the world love, and which I know many of you would love too. Remember, October's not over yet. You still have a week to fill up with mysterious, dangerous, risky, tension-filled, suspenseful reading. So until my next Mary Stewart video, be safe.